What if the most incredible, magnificent place you could ever possibly explore isn't somewhere out there in the world, but actually right inside your own mind? Well, today, we're going to dive into a really profound spiritual guide all the way from 1577 that maps out exactly that, the inner landscape of the human soul. And here it is. Take a look. This is the actual text we're exploring today. Now, it might look ancient, and it is, but the ideas packed inside have been resonating for centuries. So let's break down its central message, and we're going to start with the story of its surprisingly reluctant author. You'd probably think that someone who wrote such a famous, deep spiritual text was just dying to share her wisdom with the world, right? Well, you couldn't be more wrong. This story doesn't begin with ambition at all. It actually starts with a whole lot of hesitation. I just love this kind of honesty. Right out of the gate, the author straight up admits she did not want to write this. She says it cost her little, but that doesn't mean it was easy. And that reluctance just makes the gift she's about to give feel so much more personal and honestly a lot more powerful. So who was this incredible gift for? Well, it wasn't for the general public, not at all. It was for her fellow nuns. She explains that because they lived in a strict enclosure with pretty limited recreation, she wanted to give them something they could explore, a whole inner world that they could get to anytime they wanted. And that brings us to the core metaphor of the entire book. It's a concept that is just as beautiful as it is empowering. She calls it the interior castle. Okay, so here's the crucial idea. Your soul is like this magnificent, sprawling castle. It's a space that you can enter whenever you want. It's your own private sanctuary. And I find this part fascinating. She specifically points out that you don't need anyone's permission to go there. It is yours and yours alone. And we're not talking about some empty fortress here. Oh no. She describes this incredibly rich, vibrant world inside. There are 7 main dwellings, which she calls mansions, but there are also countless other rooms, beautiful gardens, fountains, even labyrinths. It's a place of just endless discovery. So why? Why build this whole elaborate metaphor? Well, because it has a real purpose. She writes that once you learn how to enjoy this castle, you will always find rest, however painful your trials may be. It's a constant source of peace and resilience that's always available to you. All right, so if your soul is a castle with 7 mansions, how do you actually get from one room to the next? How do you progress on this inner journey? Well, the author gives some very specific and maybe even surprising instructions. It's the natural question, isn't it? If you're in that first mansion, of course you want to know how to get to the 7th. But the answer? Well, it's not what you might expect. It's got nothing to do with effort or force. And this just illustrates the central point so brilliantly. You can't get in by your own power. You can't use violence or try to force your way in. Instead, the only way forward is through humility, by relying on the Lord of the castle and recognizing your own unworthiness. It's a complete flip of how we usually think about achieving our goals. And here it is, the paradox at the very heart of this journey. The author writes that if you believe you aren't even worthy of the 3rd mansion, you'll be granted entry into the 5th all the sooner. So true progress isn't about climbing some spiritual ladder, it's about lowering yourself. Pretty wild, right? So after laying out this entire incredible map of the soul, the author doesn't end with a big summary. Instead, she concludes with a deeply personal prayer, and it really shows where her heart and her concerns truly lie. Yeah, her final thoughts go way beyond the convent walls. She prays for her church. She prays for the Lutherans, which was a huge point of religious division at the time, and then finally for her own soul. It's this beautiful mix of, global concern and really personal humility. And she wraps it all up with this powerful declaration of faith. After exploring this vast, mystical interior world of the soul, she firmly grounds herself and her work back in the structure of her religion, submitting everything she wrote to its judgment. So let's just put this all in context for a second. The author we've been talking about was Saint Teresa of Ávila. She wrote this from her convent in Spain, and she finished it in the year 1577. Just thinking about that specific time and place helps you appreciate just how remarkable and absolutely timeless her psychological and spiritual insights really were. And with her own words, "Here ends the interior castle. We'll conclude our look at the text itself, but of course, the ideas, they don't end here." Which really just leaves us with one final question to think about. In our world, a world of constant external pressures and endless noise, what could we learn from the idea that the most magnificent, the most peaceful, and the most resilient place we can find is already inside us, just waiting to be explored?